listeners know about the African Development Bank, but let me just say one thing. It is one of the very, let's say, important development banks which are closer to us than most other banks. That means it has its priority in Africa, and since we are in the north side of Africa, we get a lot of, let's say, list of area of discussion with the African Development Bank. And also, it's very much oriented towards knowing our abilities, our African countries' abilities. So the African Development Bank is one of the most important development banks that we have at our disposal. So that's just, to give it the correct, let's say, place in our development work. Good.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Mazhar, the talks in Egypt focus on the planning ahead of the COP27. How would you describe the role of the AFDB in backing the objectives of the COP27, which will be taking place in November 2022?
Yes, well, you see, lots of things are happening now in Africa, and we have taken a leading road. Our President Sisi, has looked at all the things, taking, of course, African development very much as a priority, but we are undertaking or, let's say, attending or even sponsoring many of the activities that are going to be coming up, fortunately or unfortunately, all at the same time. So that's we are very much prepared for that event, and I think we will be able to make a very, very good contribution. We've been preparing for it for some time now, and I think our performance will be very, very positive.
Yes. Sir, the AFDB delegation met with key stakeholders such as the World Bank Group, the IMF and the Islamic Development Bank, and several UN agencies to identify the goals specific for the COP27 in support of the host nation. What goals here to expect to feature high on the agenda of the COP27?
Yes, well, let me say something. Many people, let's say, hearing all the activity we are doing, either they hear about it in the news or they see it on TV, and many people ask the question, what has Egypt or what has our country out of all this activity? What do we get out of it? And let me say the following, which is more or less the question that you posed. Having an event like this, which is being sponsored by us or being taken on our location, it gets the eyes of the world towards Egypt. It gets the eyes of the world towards Egypt, first of all, in our ability to have an activity of this size and this magnitude, so that gives us, let's say, a very special situation where everybody knows that if anybody wants to do anything for Africa or for Egypt or for North Africa, they have got a very nice area of Egypt itself, which has all the, let's say, the means of carrying this out with timing, with discussions, with invitations, and also a bit of tourism or a bit of seeing the country. So it's a positive activity and very welcome, I should say.
Yes. Sir, the AFDB delegation said that Egypt has undertaken actually tremendous efforts to address the climate change vulnerability and its impact on the key sectors, and invested significantly to put forward measures to enhance their resilience. How would you elaborate on this point?
Well, let's say, to elaborate, first of all, Egypt has got a unique, let's say, geographical situation. If you compare us with other countries, let's say industrialized countries, they have almost all the time of the year with very large emissions, with very large, let's say, industrial activity. So this acts very negatively on the environment. Now, if you look at Egypt, we have two main advantages. One is that Egypt, if you look at our land area, you find that only about 9 to 11%, this changes all the time, is areas which are, let's say, affecting negatively the whole of the environment. So we have got a good start that we are not, even if we do not do anything very much, the idea that we don't have 7 or 9% of our land having industry, and the rest is desert, is sea, is all these things which are non-polluting. They are not affecting. So we are in a very good position. Secondly, we have got this idea, and we have been taking care of not getting our environment contaminated, or let's say we're losing our environment to industry or any other thing. We have been very careful that we place our industries in areas which are not congested.
Yes.
We let's say, these are all things that we can do. But originally, Egypt is a non-polluting, let's say, area compared, let's say, to Germany or any other area which is fully full of industry or different activities.
Yes. Dr. Mazhar, we can say here that unfortunately the African continent is one of the most affected continents from the industrialized nations. How do you see here the moves that should be taken in the coming phase in order to face the climate change, which was the effect of the problems of and the emissions of the industrialized nations?
Correct. Well, look, let me say something. Anybody who knows the history of Africa, all of us know that, and the main period is when Africa was under the different effects of colonies.
Yes.
So these colonies I don't want to mention them all, but most European countries or even Asian countries found a very fertile area to do their activity here. So this meant that a lot of the effects are directly on the environment. Now, as soon as Africa started to, let's say, all the countries got their own independence, and they now are doing their own projects, so they are very careful. They don't let anybody into Africa who's only in Africa in order to get rid of their pollutants or to affect the environment. So that means that with the independence of the African countries, and also the, let's say, not only independence, political independence in taking, let's say, decisions, we can accept what we want in Africa and refuse what we don't want, which was not the case when we were under, let's say, colonial or semi-colonial, let's say, part of our history. I think that's a very important thing. That means we can take our own decisions. Gone are the times when people say we're going to bring in factories and bring in effects. We can always say thank you very much. We don't need this. We are worried about our own pollution, our own environment, etc. So it's a much better situation now with decision-making from the African countries themselves.
Sir, ahead of hosting the COP27, we have to admit here that Egypt did take many measures in order to be more environment friendly, if I might say, with the issuing of the green bonds, the usage of renewable energy. How do you see the measures taken up till this moment by Egypt in order to try to go on with the climate, being more friendly with the climate and to be ready for the COP27?
Yes, all right. Let's say one thing. We are anyhow very aware of keeping our country clean, our environment clean, etc. So this is, we take particular care in the Nile Valley, which is very small strip of our whole area. And without even having any event like this event that you were talking about now, we are very conscious of keeping everything, and people now, even our industrial policy, our development policy, all take this into, let's say, into consideration. So having also a big event coming up gives more of a stimulus to get everything in order and not to get a bad, let's say, poor situation in respect to the, let's say, anything to do with the environment, plus having now a very big activity on our doorstep makes us even more aware of having everything in order. So even though we were in order compared to many other countries who are heavily industrialized, we have always been careful to keep on the right side of it. And now with an event like this, we are even more aware of being let's say, hosting something like that.
Yes.
More aware that we are extra careful about what's going to happen to our environment.
Yes. As we have said, the purpose of the visit by the delegation of the African Development Bank is the collaboration with Egypt in order to ensure that the COP27, which will take place next November, to serve both the planet and people. How we can reach that, Dr. Mazhar?
Well, you see, let's say, look at development banks.
Yes.
Development banks, primarily they're there in order to invest their funds and also to make a profit. I mean, that's why they are there. Of course, they have also a main objective to try and get the objectives of the development bank, whether it's environment or industrialization, to get them in the priorities. So, knowing this, we are very aware what kind of bank is going to help us out or to invest. And being an African development bank, they are very aware that they will not shut out one country at the expense of another. They're looking at the whole of Africa as a whole. They're not going to, let's say, move industry or move pollution into the middle of Africa at the expense of South Africa. So this general policy, this general purpose of all the countries should go all the way equally, and the ones that are in a bad shape will get more affected. This is, the development bank has its own records, and if it's African, it has what industries are there, what let's say, fertile areas are there, what green areas are there. So they are more capable of being more conscious and getting their development funds from somebody who also cares where it goes. Before, if you were going to get, let's say, any fund which was based, let's say, in the north of Europe or something, definitely they got their way of doing things, but they are not part of the game itself. Here, the African Development Bank is part of our thing. It's financed by the different countries. The different countries have put their money in, their expertise there. So they are very, let's say, aware of what should be done, and they're very more friendly to get everything into order. So it's like getting somebody who knows the story, knows the priorities, and asking them to do the funding. It's not like anybody else who's just there for getting some extra percentage with their funding.
Indeed. Dr. Youssef Mazhar, former Assistant Minister of Trade and Industry, always a pleasure to listen to your precious input, sir. Many thanks for being with us today. And Commander of the Ugandan Land Forces met Egypt's Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces over military cooperation. A statement by the Army said that the Ugandan officials hailed the Egyptian efforts to support security